Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today I'm joined by Sri. Sri is a co-founder of Rocketlane. He's currently on his second startup journey. He previously built a SaaS product between 2012 and 2015, which eventually got acquired by Freshworks and had an amazing 4.5 years there, continuing to build the business. He's passionate about all things CX and onboarding and has been building Rocketlane since April of 2020. Thanks for joining us on the show, Sri.
Hey, thanks, David. Thanks for having me on the
And
show.
congrats on making a little more than 1 year into the new business. I imagine you've had a very exciting year, especially when you stack it on top of COVID.
Absolutely. I think even the timing of when we started was sort of determined by COVID coming into the picture
Hmm.
earlier. We're the same founding team as our last startup. So the three of us had initially intended to take a little longer of a break before we got started on the journey. And then, once we started seeing that there was this, new virus making waves, we thought, okay, let's go ahead and get started on this journey anyway, right? And accelerated our journey a bit.
So April 2020 is like pretty early in the COVID life cycle. I think people were starting to think about it maybe in January. People were talking about it in February, and business started to actually react in March. At least that's the way it worked out in my local area. Is that similar to the timelines in your local area, or are they slightly different?
Similar. So, December 2019 was our last month at Freshworks. And we thought we'll take like a few months off, do our research, figure out what we want to build, and then, get into the actual startup mode.
Hmm.
And in March, we were actually looking for co-working space, saying, hey, you know what, maybe by May or June, we'll start something. And, let's lock in some space, right? And we had sort of even pushed all our VC conversations to later, saying, hey, we want to take a little bit of a break before we get on this journey.
Hmm.
And then we started seeing news of lockdowns happening in other countries. In mid-March, we also had, a preview of what's coming in India. So we sort of said, okay, let's, if we're going to be locked up anyway, we're not going to be on a vacation somewhere. And we have been doing our research anyway on this space. We've been talking to like a few hundred people
Hmm.
about the problem we were solving and so on. So we said, you know, might as well start building and, start hiring people, close our conversations to the VCs, do all of that right now and get going.
Does that mean your design for the company is to go down the path of having a fully remote team, or do you see this as a temporary thing until COVID restrictions are lifted?
I think when we started the company, we thought this is going to be like a temporary thing. And so when we hired people, our communication to the team was, hey, we're gonna, I'll do this from Chennai, and like we will have like an office in the US eventually after all of this is done. So those are going to be like the two locations, and we aligned most people to move to Chennai after the lockdown was finished, which we thought will be like June or July of 2020, right?
Hmm.
And then things kept extending, and we built and sort of have even launched our product in private beta. So we are more confident that we can operate remotely, but we feel the people who joined us on this journey are missing out on the fun of building together from one space, forming those bonds beyond like the work that we do together online through Slack and so on. We try to create avenues for teams to bond and get to know each other better. But I think we briefly had a co-working space in February before we went into a lockdown again in April. But the moments we have when we are together, the rush and energy that happens in a startup team, that's I think something which I want the team to
Hmm.
experience. So we'll sort of try to make it bring back people into the office after all of this is done. I don't know when. At least that's the thought right now.
And when you said team, this is back in February and March of 2020. What was a team beyond just the co-founders?
No, February, March of 2020, it was just the three of us.
Okay,
We started hiring people, making our offers from, April, May,
I see. Okay.
June last year, which is when we started bringing on people. So this year, Feb, March, we actually went to a co-working space.
Okay.
Last year, we were looking for the space. This year, we actually went and sat out of those spaces for a couple of months before moving back to remote, right? And not everyone moved to Chennai in that time because people were still waiting for their vaccination. But those who were in Chennai in India sort of came into the office we had over here for that brief period of time.
During this time, are co-working spaces cheaper? Are they more expensive? How's that played out locally?
Yeah, I think they're definitely cheaper. I wouldn't say it depends on the category, right? So the tier one sort of spaces, which everyone anyway looks out for, they don't want to reduce their prices by too much. It's still cheaper than before, but let's say 20% cheaper, not 50%
I
cheaper,
see.
right? That's how it's playing out right now. But the others who are not so much in the tier one, tier two, probably it's 50% cheaper.
You mentioned building this business as with the same founding team as a previous business that you founded with them. How'd you build these connections? Like, how'd you get to meet these people, and how'd you know that you were a good fit, not just for the first business, but subsequent businesses as well?
Right. So I think the first time, obviously, it was more of us taking a chance on each other, right? And we had known each other for a decade back then. So 2001 is when I started college, and that's where I met Vignesh, one of my co-founders. Deepak is the third founder, and Vignesh and Deepak knew each other from school days. Like they grew up in the same locality, so they knew each other, they played with each other, and so on. And you can say it was more of all of us knew we wanted to do something. We had like been in touch, discussing ideas and so on for many years. And we knew we were interested in doing something together. And I had worked in a startup just before my last startup stint, right? Like before starting Conator, which was our previous startup. I had worked in a very early stage company for a year and a half as head of product. That gave me a confidence that, hey, you know what? I know what it's like to run a startup. I mean, obviously, you need to be a little delusional to start. And the delusion in me was I thought it's easy to do this, right? I thought it's easy to raise some money, easy to build and launch a product. I felt I had been like responsible for hiring and running that team for the previous startup. So in that confidence, I had a conversation with Vignesh and Deepak, and they were also, Vignesh was at Zynga, Deepak was at eBay. All of us had like a good, we had good experience behind us to feel confident about building something. And but the actual dynamic of how it's going to be working together, because we had been friends for a long time, but and we had worked in the same organizations. Me and Vignesh had worked together at two companies before that, but we hadn't worked as one team. And so we sort of knew that we are okay screaming at each other one day and then, still coming back the next day without any ego and working with each other. So that gave us the confidence that we can do something together. What helps us, once the first journey happened, it was clear that we had a good working relationship. We had a good dynamic and rapport as a team. We thought of things the same way. Our idea of what culture we want to build was similar. So that really helped us. And also because we had the same outcomes, right? The last journey. That meant our risk appetite was similar this time. We sort of knew that all of us are swinging for the fences because we have the same safety net, so to speak. So that's what I think made us think, okay, we have this rare combination of like one person who's looking at business, one product, and one tech. And we are also on a sort of equal footing. So we know what we want. We understand each other really well after the last startup journey because we did a lot of introspection and questioning ourselves on what we are doing, where we want to go, what our dreams are, and all of that in the last journey. So this time it was almost automatic. I would say one of the reasons to start up was also to do this again with the same bunch of people.
It's really cool to see those stories where people really get along and they want to build all future businesses together. I feel pretty similarly towards my current co-founder for another business that I run, and it's definitely neat. And I look forward to seeing where those relationships blossom down the line. Like I'm pretty sure even after your current business, if you were to ever start another one, you'd probably want to choose the exact same team. Is that right?
Pretty much.
So what is it about these people? Like, what were the traits in them as individuals, and what was your vision that you shared individually that you felt made it all work together?
I think, the last time we started, it was a lot more, vague dreams than, realistic targets around what we wanted to accomplish. To be honest, that's where it started on the first journey, right? So it was more like, hey, we want to make impact. We want to build a big business, but there was no definition of what big meant back then, right? So we had seen other interesting companies, and at that point in time, it looked like, build something and make it $1 million business was good enough, right? The first time around, that was the thought. And for all of us, it was also about the joy of building, and we sort of had similar. All of us said, "Hey, for 1 year, let's try this out," right? We're quitting our jobs, so what we're losing out is like 1 year of salary, and we're okay with that. We had slightly different financial situations back then, but all of us were okay with that 1 year time window. Now, after it became 1 year, we did extend it by like 6 months, and then in between there were some things that happened to us where we got some money through like an accelerator program. We started billing customers, and we won something called Q Prize from Qualcomm and Axel. So that gave us a bunch of more money, and then the journey continued. But what helped was, I think, the way we thought about building product was similar in some ways, right? And we wanted to do things in a data-driven way, and yet we wanted to bring in like new hypotheses, try new things, experiment a bit, and we had that appetite to do those experiments, right? And all of us were coding, all of us were like doing everything, but we had quick clarity on who is like the authority on each aspect, right? So the way it worked was, Vignesh had been at Zynga, and he had done some amazing things with some of their games, and I knew that he was like the creative guy among the three of us, and so by default he became like the product owner. Deepak was like very clearly the guy who takes all the tech calls. Though obviously, having worked in a startup, having seen things at Zynga, even I and Vignesh had perspective on, hey, there could be other ways to look at this. So we'll brainstorm on even technical things with Deepak, though we had both been product managers before. And finally, Deepak will take a call, right? So the thing was, I think there was a clear lack of ego around decisions. So we would look at it as, okay, this is what you learned, this is what I learned, and what makes sense now, rather than trying to have like my way versus your way, right? And whatever the other two did not want to do is what I ended up doing. So whether it's like talking to investors, or pitching to accelerator programs, or trying to get business, writing blogs, trying to do our version of marketing back then, that was me. So I was just left to whatever others don't want to do, accounts, all the work that no one wants to touch was what I was doing as my primary thing. So that became the team, and we sort of knew what each person was bringing to the table. We had that respect for what we were doing, and I think that helped us stay strong, irrespective of like what we will argue about. And we've had those moments, right? For example, if I feel strongly about something on product, I am going to voice my opinion. I am going to say, hey, you know what? I think this is the right way. And Vignesh is going to say, no, this is the right way. And over a period of time, one of us starts doing the research on what the other person is saying. In this case, I would sometimes make the wrong assumption, saying, hey, that's Vignesh's opinion versus my opinion, right? And then I would do the homework to say, hey, okay, product is his call, so let me do the homework to see if I can prove what I'm saying is like a better approach for something, or makes more sense. So I'll dig into metrics, or I'll look at proxies. I will do my research online, and then I'll realize that, hey, you know what? Maybe Vignesh did the same bunch of research, and that's why he's sticking to his opinion. So I would then talk to him about it, and I'll find that yes, he went through those same steps. So then you start forming that trust that, hey, you know what? He is doing the hard work. It's not like I'm the only one who's doing that homework to arrive at a decision. So then it became smoother, right? So that once that trust is established in how we approach problems, you then are happy to go with what the other person says.
In terms of equity split, do you follow the all co-founders are equal type of philosophy, or do you like divide equity based on like, I don't know, like there's I think two major philosophies I'm familiar with. The first one is like the Y Combinator model, is that if you're a co-founder, you're in this together, and all co-founders have the same level of equity. The other philosophy is you have equity based on the financial value you bring to the business, as well as the risk that you're taking personally. Like which camp do you fall in?
The YC camp, though I didn't know that YC had that philosophy.
It's not their like
But for us,
hard rule, but it's a recommendation from some of the older YC like folk.
right. For us, I think it was about two things. One, the last time around, we did have a similar opportunity cost in terms of what we were letting go of to build the startup. And we saw that worked for us, right? So there was no need for anyone to justify what they were bringing to the table and why someone's getting more or less. It was just cleaner, right? And since we had a good outcome, and that left us all in a good place. After that, it just made sense to continue with that same sort of mindset for our next startup as well. We have had VCs tell us, hey, like who's CEO, who's making the decisions. Last time we didn't even have a CEO, right? We were all three co-founders. I looked at business, Vignesh looked at product, Deepak looked at tech. Probably, I was taking more of the business calls, leading those investor relationships. So this time we said, okay, let's just formalize that, because I think that's what the world wants. Let's have like one person called CEO, and we did that this time. But last time we didn't even do that.
Gotcha. And did investors have any issues with that like three-way, I guess, split with when there's no defined definitions on paper?
I think last time it did get questioned, though we didn't raise money. We put together like an angel round and we got acquired.
I see.
Like after I'd signed the term sheet before they signed it. But this time there were no questions asked. They just knew us as a mature team, which knows what they're comfortable with. So it was pretty easy.
Earlier, you mentioned impact as a North Star, as something that all three of you want to strive after. How do you define impact?
So yeah, last time it was more about, we started with a B2C idea and then pivoted into SaaS. And in our minds, it was about saying we need to change some behavior of people around us, right? So impact meaning, how do we make life better for people? How do we bring something magical, that feels magical and changes habits of people? That was impact to us. And to an extent, I would say, we looked at the whole messaging revolution, right, which was happening all over the world. Everyone had shifted from phone calls to messages, WhatsApp, and so on. We brought that behavior from just consumers chatting with each other to people messaging with businesses. We were sort of pioneers in that space from back in 2013. We made that happen in a lot of big brands in India, where people, instead of emailing support or tweeting to support, would from within their apps just message the business and hear a response. Now I think it's fairly common to expect that to happen across apps, or the brands are also on WhatsApp and Telegram and whatnot now. But back then it felt like we were having that impact. This time more, I think it's more about, it's not the same thing, right? It's not about like creating a magical experience or a new experience for people. It's more about building a big valuable business and taking a bunch of team members along with us in that journey and creating enormous growth for all of them in various angles, right? Like, how can I help all of them level up in not just in terms of wealth and exit options and so on, but also in terms of what they're doing. Can we build a global brand? So the marketing team needs to level up to be able to learn and do that. Can we build a world-class product, right? And the tech team, the developers, the designers, everyone is being pushed to level up to really build this as a global business from day one. And that is what we see as creating impact. It's more of ecosystem impact we're creating, as well as like creating a new playbook that hopefully other companies can also follow in the future and sort of create a successful business, right? So that's sort of the goal this time.
And just to clarify, is that your definition of impact, or is that your three-way unified vision of impact?
It's I mean, we don't think of it as impact necessarily this time. Right? Last time was what I talked about as that was where we aligned. This time it's more of, we know we want to build a big business. We want to create that growth for everyone. And that's like a common thing for us. It's a common vision for all of us that we saw what it meant for people at Freshworks, right? When Freshworks went through that high growth journey, how people like had that automatic success that came with the growth of the company, right? And that felt like something to strive for, something to make happen more often, right? It shouldn't be that it happens only in few companies. How can we do more of it? How can we, discover new playbooks which are more suitable for today's day and age? Because if you try to repeat what Freshworks learned 10 years ago, that may not work now.
The most interesting thing to me in the world of startups is how fast information like pops up and also gets outdated. Like you just mentioned how company like playbooks can change from even like year to year, especially when you throw in things like COVID. I've seen lots of businesses pivot almost like 180 degrees during COVID to do something entirely different because of the opportunity that arose during, I guess, changes in situations. So how'd you go from, I guess, in-app messaging to your current business, and how'd you get the product ideas behind it, and how'd you know that was the problem domain you wanted to tackle?
Right, I think we got like a fairly wide view of what are the various things that B2B business are doing at Freshworks, right? As that company grew, we knew how we were using CRMs, how our chat product was being used, how support solutions were used, customer success solutions were being used, and so on. But one area where there was a very clear gap was customer onboarding, right? And we ourselves felt the pain because I was heading this business, and for me to know, hey, we have these, really large customers that we are onboarding across Europe and US. What's happening with those accounts? Why are they still not live with our product? I had to ask people because there was no central place where I could see what's happening. Then I made a spreadsheet. I asked people to update it. Then it would be about following up with people to update the spreadsheet, right? And if I want to know a little more detail on why something is red or green or delayed, I need to know which spreadsheet to open to track what's happening within that account, or which Trello board, or is it a spreadsheet or a Trello board for this account, right? So there was no centralized mechanism for it. And I started, the more I got into this, it felt like there were documents floating around. There were emails with status updates. There were these Trello boards, spreadsheets, risk checklists, feature request checklists, and all these different documents that we were exchanging back and forth with customers, which was hard to, for me to be on top of. It was also hard for the project manager or engagement manager on the account to be on top of. And likewise for the customer as well, it felt like a very subpar experience that we were giving them, right? And that's where we thought, why not rethink how onboarding happens, right? If we were to build a tool for this high-touch customer onboarding journey where you have a project starting from a kickoff to solutioning, implementation, migration of data, training, testing, go live, and post that as well, making sure that the customer is deriving value. Because the more and more you're moving to SaaS products, if someone realizes that they haven't extracted value from your product, the implementation didn't go well, it's a great reason for them to say, hey, you know what, I'm not renewing. I'm just going to go back to how I used to do this before you, right? So we saw that the more we talked to people about the problem, the more it resonated that people were building these great products. They were managing to sell them, and the sales playbook was sort of established. Snowflake and others have figured out how to grow really rapidly on the sales front. And now the new bottleneck looked like onboarding, because over here there was no good tooling in place. There was this gap building between your contracted ARR and your live ARR. And very clearly it came out that this was an area of concern. Boards like investors and founders were talking about this in the board meetings that, hey, this is a problem we need to solve. When you talk to like the project manager, you could feel the stress of going live with a large customer. And when you talk to heads of CS, they clearly wanted to, up level the CX for their onboarding journey. And they weren't able to do that. They had to cobble so many tools together to manage a semblance of that. And so it made sense for us to say, okay, let's look at this with a fresh pair of eyes and build something ground up which makes sense for them.
Were most of these, I guess, experiences things that you personally saw, or did you do a lot of customer discovery interviews to get this information?
Yeah, I would say 15-20% of it is probably our own, experience. But we learned a lot more from talking to so many people over the last year. We recorded every single conversation we had, so that when we have new team members join in, we have them watch some of these videos as highlights, right? So we've created these reels of highlights so that they're, developing the same empathy that we have for the problem, right? So they can relate to the problem better when they hear people talking about it. And that's part of our sort of employee onboarding journey, right? To send a bunch of videos to them to watch and say, hey, this is what we're trying to, create a difference around.
If you have a ballpark in mind, how many of these like discovery calls have you done? If you combine all the ones that you and your co-founders have done?
Say probably somewhere between 160 and 200.
Okay. And what was the point in that range where you felt confident that you were ready to get started?
No, I think we got started a lot earlier. We probably did 60, 50, 40 to 60 before we started, but we continued doing that because we found value from doing it. And even now, this includes, interviews we do today with prospective customers. The first part of it is still discovery, right? And we then go to show them our solution and then see their reactions and so on. So overall, it would be probably that 200 number or even more, perhaps. I'm not counting, but but I think part of it, part of every customer conversation is at least the first 15-20 minutes is going to be discovery.
So a part of the reason I'm doing this podcast is to help early stage founders and those who are considering entrepreneurship for the first time get started. And I recognize that customer discovery is an incredibly important process. What advice would you give to people who are trying to go about like customer discovery the first time, who may not have connections in the industry?
I can share what's worked for me, and I don't know if this is going to be easy for others, but so one thing we had working for us was VCs did give us meetings always, right? And for every VC meeting, we would ask them to introduce us to portfolio companies which fit a certain description, which in our mind was our ICP, right? Ideal customer profile. And we're not asking them for money, we're asking for intros into their portfolio. And that way, they're okay with making those connections because they're going to learn something about our market after we talk to the company, right? They're going to back channel with the potential customer of ours and find out whether the problem resonated and so on. So in that sense, they're willing to do that. And when we have those conversations, what's important, I think, is not to just focus on your version of the problem and whether it's a real problem, but you also need to, and this is something I learned, some article I read, and it made a lot of sense, that you need to ask them to stack rank their problems, right? And what are the top 5 problems in their mind? Because, when we talk about a problem, yes, if it is a problem, it's going to resonate and they're going to start, it's going to feel amplified in that meeting. But if it's not one of the top 5 problems that company is trying to solve, then probably they're not going to find the bandwidth to engage on it, right? It's not about having the budget to pay. It's also about everything now needs a program around it, right? You need to, especially with saying to mid-market or enterprise, they need to take on those initiatives in a quarter to, change something, implement a new tool, whatever that is. And if that needs to make sense, then you can't start from just your problem. You need to know what else is a problem they're trying to solve. Where does this problem rank in the list of problems?
So when you're trying to have these conversations with these VC firms, did you just go through all the major ones, or like how'd you go about that strategy to have these conversations, and did you order them a specific way?
I would say the way we looked at it, we did have a list of folks who were in touch with us, after our previous journey, and this time I think people were also looking at who's coming out of Freshworks to start something new and sort of trying to say, hey, let's work together. So it was a lot of inbound rather than outbound. But within that as well, we had our ordering based on a bunch of things. We knew some people as being more positive. So we don't want to start with VCs who are going to make you feel low, right? You want to start from the right set of people who you derive energy from, you enjoy the conversations with, and sort of go from there. But we sort of, because it was inbound, it was not something in which we control the order. Yeah.
So let's say you didn't have a VC connection. How'd you go about breaking into building connections in that space?
I would say, hopefully you have founder friends or a local community of founders from your region, right? And the last time in our journey, I think that was a great help for us, where we had this set of Chennai-based entrepreneurs. It was called the Filter Copy Mafia, which is like, it's the Chennai South India coffee, around which people bonded and got together and discussed their startups. So we had that group to rely on from the perspective of like inputs, feedback, connections, etc. And then from there, it was about cold connects with potential customers. Some of these customers say, hey, you know what, I really like what you're doing. I raised money from this VC. You should meet them. And they made some intros. Of course, we met people at startup events, which used to happen physically back in the day. So, that's definitely one place where we got to form a lot of new connections. And I don't know how that happens today in the virtual world. It's so much harder, I guess. But yeah, I mean, that's how we went about doing it the last time around.
You mentioned stack ranking and like, I guess, finding that urgency of the problem. Well, if you had to stack rank, I guess, the top 5 problems that your business is currently facing, like how would you rank those?
All right. I would say
maybe 5's too many. Let's go with 3.
Okay. I think I want an amplifier, right? Like I want a bigger voice to talk to a larger audience. I want to be in front of more potential customers so that they take note of what we're building and qualify themselves as, hey, okay, that's interesting for me. I want to get that solution. And, if you can turn everything into inbound, I think that has great power. And that's something I would love to see solved for us in a magical way, right? So today we are participating in events and so on, showcasing what we do. That's one way to get that megaphone. But I'd love to see more ideas around that and solutions for us. The second thing I would say is, and this I don't see this necessarily as a top problem, but it's still high priority for us, which is creating more engagement within our team on a consistent basis. We have a few rituals that we follow, and we are happy with the way things are. But I think there's always ways to make things better. And I'm always looking for, hey, is there something else that helps our team come together in more ways, form better bonds with each other, connect on a more personal level, have one-on-ones more frequently, learn from each other. I think if there are ways to facilitate that, I would always look for tools and experiences around that. And thirdly, I think, we use CRM. We have our spreadsheets as well. But I think if there were a way to organize even better, all of the conversations we are having, the next tasks that we need to do were more automatically surfaced up without someone having to look at our CRM and figure out which lead we have to touch, what's happening with, all these follow-ups and so on. And that may not be the company's biggest problem, but it's sort of top of mind for me. So I'm saying it. Maybe I need to think more to do the real stack ranking, but it just feels like something that needs better handling.
When you mention rituals for your team, can you walk us through some of the rituals that you built into your culture or things that organically arose in your culture?
Sure. I think one of the things we do is when we onboard any new employee, we have a fun interview with them, which with each of them, which we record, and then we have a repository of everyone's intro videos, just so that anyone walking into the team can learn about each other, watch those videos and so on. We have this app called copy.team, and it's the same copy as in coffee again. But what copy does is every Tuesday it posts a random question to the whole team about something fun, right? Like, what's your favorite music album? Or after COVID, what is the first place you will visit and why? Or if you're a Avenger, which one are you? And so on, right? So random crazy stuff, which when people answer those questions, we learn a little more about each other in a very informal way. And then every Thursday, it asks a more serious question for which the answers are not necessarily in public. I think it just sends me the answers. It's more about, how are you feeling? And do you think you're learning on a consistent basis in the role that you have? Do you think your ideas are being heard? Things like that, right? Which people can answer honestly, and the answers come to us. And, we decide whether this is something that warrants looking deeper into, or are things good. So that's one. And then we obviously have our stand-ups and so on. I'm not going to get into the more usual things. Every Thursday we have what we call an all faces meeting. This is like all hands, but we need to turn on our video, so it's all faces.
I like
it. Yeah. So that's just about hanging out, having fun together as a team. We may play some games, or if there is an update from a company perspective, we share that in that meeting. If there is a new initiative we need to align around. So sometimes it's more, me or Vignesh or Deep with talking about an initiative, energizing the team, or we think we're energizing them. Hopefully it has that impact. Sometimes it's random banter. Sometimes it's playing games. Sometimes it's a combination, right? So and we also have people can ask any questions. A lot of the team members are here with us because they want to learn and grow, right? So they want to learn about startups. What does it take? They want to be part of this journey. And so they may ask a question about angel investing. They may ask a question about startups, about how does the VC model work, and so on, right? So any kind of thing about our ambitions or about something from our previous journey. So it just becomes answering questions for part of the time. Every Friday we have a demo day, demo hour, right? It's not 1 hour, it's actually probably 2 hours, 3 hours, where everyone's sort of showcasing what they built over the last week. And it's right now more of a product and engineering team focused demo hour. We are trying to bring the same into marketing as well. Like, what did we ship this week on the marketing side? Not yet, doing that in a consistent manner. So the marketing team is still younger than the product team. So we're still coming to terms with what, how to be consistent and what did we ship, and can we share that in front of the bigger team already or not. But yeah, that's the demos are awesome because everyone one day before the demo, they actually work very closely with our design team to polish what they're going to show. And that sort of ensures that whatever is shown in the demo is not like, hey, I built a POC. It's actually something that's going to be looking good when it ships out. And we are really, really proud of what customers say all the time when they look at our product now is I can't believe that your product has just been out for 2 months in private beta because it looks so good. And how do you guys ship something that looks so good so early in your journey, right? So that's something we are very proud of. And I think that's thanks to this tradition, right? Which started off as more of a check-in for us to know what's happening with everyone, but it became a demo day sort of thing. Every week, let's do the demo on Friday. So it's always fun. Everyone's waiting for demo.
And when I first saw your website, I took a guess as to how long your business has been in business, and I was thinking something in the range of at least 3 to 4 years. And when I realized that you've only been open for a little over a year, I was pretty impressed. I think it's a rare combination to see. Most of the time, you see these. I guess most companies at the 1 year mark, they have a like static web page that might even be hosted by WordPress, and then all the features themselves are all like only exist in the sales conversation form, and they're not really like there's no deep dive into them on the website. So it is cool to see how far you've come, and it's cool to see the steps that lead to that like fruit.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think we've been very conscious of what we put out from very early in the journey, because we don't want to be judged as a small startup, given I think we have a lot of experience behind us of building world-class products. So we want everything we do to reflect that. And we want to be judged as, okay, this team can churn out world-class stuff. And so it's a conscious effort. We're going to have a new version of our website launching in a couple of weeks from now. And I think, I really feel excited about it. It's like really beautiful, will come out well. So yeah, waiting for that.
Send me an email when that's out. I'd love to see it.
Sure.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier is that you're spinning up a marketing team. What does marketing look like in the early days of a startup? I think I'm familiar with more like outbound sales, and I think that's more traditional. But how do you think about marketing for a company that's just over a year old?
Right. So for us, because we have seen the strength of inbound at Freshworks, right? I was doing the outbound, founder-based, founder-driven selling at Conator, the previous startup. But when I saw how easy it was once you have that inbound engine working, right? And if you have that as a lever that you can increase some spend or do something to grow your leads, it's a very different kind of journey. And you have more growth problems, like problems that come with growth that you need to face, which I think is happy for everyone. So we wanted to sort of get into that zone if possible. We don't know if that's going to work for the market we picked, because it's also an evangelistic play. It's also like a new category altogether. But we want to be seen as a leader in that category, which is why we invested a lot in marketing. So anyone thinks of customer onboarding, I think Rocketlane should come to mind. That's sort of where we're going with this. We should have like the maximum mind share. So we started very early on, like, with the first few people we were doing the customer discovery with, we sort of asked them to join a Slack group, right? And slowly that snowballed into a Slack community for customer onboarding, implementation, and so on. So we now run a Slack community. It has its own brand. It's called Pre-Flight. And that's where people in Pre-Flight don't necessarily know about Rocketlane. Pre-Flight is its own thing, right? Where people come and learn, share about all things onboarding, implementations, and so on. Now there's an event that branched out of Pre-Flight where one day a founder told me, hey, you're solving onboarding. I'm so happy because, these are the problems I had and this is what things look like now. And I said, hey, can you tell that to a larger audience? And we created an event around it called Implementation Stories, where it was actually called Implementation Nightmares. And, then we didn't want to make it very negative. So we said, okay, let's just make it stories. And so the last time this happened, there were like 40 people from our community who attended the event. So that was really nice to see, right? And we've had 12 of those events right now. We're trying to do 2 a month now instead of 1 a month. So those were the seeds of marketing, because from those implementation stories, then we have like good questions coming in. We have content that's created. We write about it. We blog about it. We also post on LinkedIn and, Twitter on these topics and on the learnings from these sessions, right? So it sort of builds an audience around it automatically, right? And we started a podcast because we wanted to learn. So we said, hey, when we are doing these interviews to learn, why would people accept doing an interview with you if they're like a big shot in customer onboarding or customer education or whatever, right? We're going to feature them. So they're going to say yes to us. And we learn and we share that with the community. And the community also knows that they're learning from us. So Launch Station is our podcast. And we've done like 12 episodes. The 13th one should come out this week. So that's season 1. It's a wrap on season 1 with this week, but we should do it next season by end of June. We should get started on that. So podcast is one more. And honestly, we should have launched our website much earlier. We launched it in March this year. We wanted to launch it earlier. So marketing team has like one person running community now, one person focused on content marketing, sort of writing our blog posts. We have lots of content that is waiting to be published. I think we have more drafts than posts today because I started writing in March last year, right? So once we said, okay, we're going to do this, even before the company started, I had started brainstorming topics to write about. And, one of the things I read somewhere is, spend a weekend thinking about what will be the chapters of a book if you were to publish a book on your category, right? And I sort of did that exercise. And from that emerged a lot of topics. I started writing about some of them. I take things to like 85% complete, but I'm not great at polishing it and pushing it out. So it's waiting on my content marketer to sort of take it, polish it, and publish it as well. And we have another sort of product marketing manager who's also this, idea person. So he comes up with a lot of ideas on what we can do on social. So we have something called Rocketlane Unfiltered, which is just a Q&A. It's like a game we play with the folks who are popular on Twitter for customer success, right? And so that's another thing. He also helps me with the podcast scripts and so on. We do a little more of like research and share the questions in advance, etc. For so it helps us also think through what we want to talk about. And so and of course he comes up with like the messaging, the product deck, the script for videos that we make, and so on. There's obviously a lot more we need to do, but right now it's like a 3-member marketing team, and we also have a couple of interns who are making templates for us so that we can give great templates to like great resources for our community and for our blog subscribers, etc. So that's what it looks like today.
So you mentioned those 3 people. What about, I guess, how large is the team today, and what's the composition of those members?
We're actually 22 plus 2 interns. Right? I think 23 plus 2 or 22 plus 3. I'm not 100% sure anymore because I think we converted one person from intern to full-time employee recently. The engineering team is 11 people, 2 product, 2 design. So it's like 15 people working on product overall. Actually, maybe it's 16 now. Then there's like 6 of us, actually 7 of us on the GTM side. I also have 1 salesperson and 1 customer success person. And there's also 1 admin person who helps us, like admin come HR in a way. Like she helps us with a lot of things that we need to do to run the business, right? And taking care of employees. Like tomorrow in our all faces meeting, we are bringing a physiotherapist, and she arranged for that so that he can teach us all about like the right posture to sit in while we're working long hours, and how to relax, how to do some exercises so that we're not feeling stiff at the end of the day, etc.
Who's that? And that's a relatively new idea?
Yeah, I mean, our admin person, Vidya, she suggested this a couple of days back. We did a vote on whether people want this or not today on Slack. People said yes, and so we're doing it tomorrow.
So I think it's relatively uncommon to see companies of your age take on build internship opportunities. How did you know you wanted to go about that process, and how did you build it to find the ideal intern?
I think this is something we saw at Freshworks, and there's another startup founder who's pretty close with us, building a company called Super Ops. Maybe you should take him on for one of your podcasts as well. And we saw that he was hiring interns, and he was like, "Hey, are you not going to get interns yet?" And we were like, "Okay, what do we do with interns? Do we have something solid that we can give them, which is not necessarily on a critical path, but is going to be learning for them, is going to be useful for us if we get it done well?" And so we thought something that's more like individual research oriented, where they have to learn about a topic, then create a template based on it. It helps us also then, when we are reviewing it, we learn about the topic, we apply our lens of more experience in the domain and give them some suggestions on how to change things. And then they work on it, and we go ahead and publish it, right? So that's the nature of the internship right now, but it can take more forms, right? Even for community, we started with someone who was doing it part-time as an intern, and then we liked what she was doing and she liked the work as well, so we said, okay, let's do this, let's make this a full-time job.
Can you dive into what you'd have them research? Like what is important but not on the critical path?
Right. I think when I say important but not on the critical path, for example, for me to build a brand and establish us as a leader, it was necessary to have like a good quality podcast. So that became something that I need to do right away, right? Versus if I'm talking about these resources that we share with our community, share on our blog, if it goes out a month later than it has right now, I'm okay with it, right? It's not something that will stall the progress of the company. So that way, it's not on the critical path. We need to get it done as soon as we can. It's good to get it done, but if it doesn't get done, I'm okay with that. So that's sort of what we decide as okay, not on the critical path, needs some research, and is going to take its own time, but when it gets done, it's going to add value to us.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, I've been very grateful for your time. I think this has been a great conversation. I just like to end all of my calls the same way. What's the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you if that's something they'd like to do?
I'm SRI@rocketlane.com. Just drop me a mail. That's pretty much the best way. And of course, if you go to rocketlane.com and sign up, I will get in touch with you automatically.